All right, so welcome everyone to a super exciting panel discussion on Take the Helm, Guidance for Prospective Future CISOs. Today, we're going to have an adventure through the world of security leadership like never before. I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined by four amazing panelists. Each of them has stepped into a CISO role for the first time in their careers, and they're making a real impact at their companies. We're going to go over their unique stories, challenges that they faced stepping into the role, and soak up any insights that they have to offer. If you're thinking about being a CISO or you're just curious about what it takes, today is going to be a good learning experience. All right, so to get started, panelists, starting with Ari, if you can go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us about your role, and to add a little bit of flair to your intro, a fun fact about yourself or a hobby that you love doing.
Yes, I will absolutely start this. And also, the fun fact was not in the prep document. So, hi, everyone. My name is Arianna Willett. I go by Ari. I grew up outside of Boston, went to school there, spent some time consulting there before I decided that the snow was not for me. I moved out to San Francisco, started working for what at the time was a small company called Twilio, had an amazing ride there, spent a brief stint at Okta, also awesome, and I'm currently the head of security and privacy at Ngrok, which is an API-first ingress as a service company. Oh, and my fun fact, sorry, again, wasn't in the prep document. My fun fact is that I one time tried to break the pogo stick world record for pogoing, and I failed miserably, and also I was by myself, so even if I did break it, no one would have known.
Did you break the pogo stick or not?
I lost count, actually. I was 10.
We love hearing about failures.
All right, I'll go. Can you guys hear me? So my name is Emre. Emre Sağlam, but Emre is easier for you, everybody. And kind of in the same theme, I grew up in Turkey, outside of this country, and then I ended up here, mostly on the East Coast, Washington, D.C., worked there for World Bank for about 8 years. Did like a lot of server security and network security there, and then I ended up here in the Bay Area, and then worked at Apple, Salesforce, Lending Club, and back to Salesforce. Some of them are mostly like engineering roles, and then some of them are leadership roles. And now I'm head of security and compliance at a small company called Dremio. We do data lake houses. Fun fact about me, so many of them, but let's choose one. I got escorted out of a pretty important Las Vegas hotel because I kind of hacked into their. I didn't want to. I just touched the four corners, one of those kind of like interactive panels, and just if you do that thing at the lobby, the definition of the shortest amount of time is you touching those four corners and you being escorted out. So that's pretty quick like this.
Gorgeous. I'm Katie Ledoux. I am from Boston. I still live in Boston. I'll just die there in the snow, clutching a Dunkin' Donuts iced coffee. I just can't escape. I spent most of my career at Rapid7, cybersecurity vendor, but I was on their internal security team. I built the security team at another data company like Dremio, called a competitor called Starburst. It was very annoying to work there because a lot of people asked me about the candy. And it was so frustrating that I left to start the security team at Attentive, where I am now. And I have two cats that are named after the Deschanel sisters. That's my fun fact. We were going to name them after A-list celebrities, but then our friend pointed out that they really aren't, like, they're very generic shelter cats. And so we should name them after C-list celebrities. So we named them after Zoe Deschanel and Emily Deschanel, but we call that one Bones because she's the main character in Bones.
Nice.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kyle Tobener. I grew up around here in the Bay Area. I'm actually from a little town called Healdsburg. I spent 10 years at Salesforce. Yeah. I spent 10 years at Salesforce owning enterprise AppSec and vendor security. And then I've now been 2 years at a place called Capado as their head of security and IT. And fun fact about me, pre-pandemic, I used to run the largest board game night in San Francisco. And this is actually relevant because I'll mention this later.
Awesome. And lastly, I am Divya Dwarakanath. I'm a senior manager at Snap, and I'm really enjoying being responsible for AppSec, CorpSec, Red Team, and supply chain security. And a fun fact about me is that I'm a big Lakers fan.
Nice.
All right, so let's get started. Why did you want to be a CISO, and when did you think was the right time to step into the role?
I'll start. I haven't decided yet if I would like to be a CISO. For folks who I've chatted about this with, of whom there are several in this room, I have been incredibly adamant about not wanting to be the head of security for a very, very long time. And yet here I am talking to all of you about being head of security. I recently sat down and thought through like what it was that made me not want to be a head of security, and came up with 2 reasons. One was the politics are so terrible. And the second was a huge case of imposter syndrome. And when I moved to Ngrok, the company was around 30 folks. And so the politics were just like, there's not really that many politics at a 30-person company. And we've grown since then, but having a supportive boss and a supportive CEO and CRO about security meant that I wasn't having a lot of the struggles that I had seen prior CISOs have that I had worked for. And so really then all that was left was my imposter syndrome, of which that was kicked out of me by several friends of mine, some of whom are sitting at this table with me. And so I had a conversation with the CTO who I report to, and right now I'm kind of just trying it out to kind of see how I feel about it, and if it's something that I really don't want to do, or if it was just something that I didn't want to do because I wasn't in the right place. And so that's how I ended up here. So to answer the question, I'm not sure. And also I feel like it's whenever is right for you, whenever it feels right in like your career and also your personal life, because I feel like it's a big job and it's a big commitment.
Right. But even to step into the head of security role, what made you feel ready? Like, did you have certain skill sets that you thought that, okay, I can use this?
Yes and no. I think part of the thing that kind of helped me realize that that was a thing that I was ready for was when I first joined, I was the only security person, again, 30-person company when I started. And so I was kind of already doing all of security and already thinking about security strategy and where we should go next and who we should hire. I think that doing that helped me realize like, oh, I can do this with just a team as well. And as the company grows. And so that was kind of the thing that made me sit up and realize that this was something that I felt ready to step into.
So I know politics is kind of an icky word, and it is a big part of a leadership job. But I actually love the politics of my job. So I knew that I wanted to be in this type of role when I first moved into a management role, and I would think back about, okay, what was the highlight from my week? It was always something that had to do with the people on the team. So it was like, oh, we got someone's H-1B visa thing figured out. Like, that's so sick. Or, I think also we've all been on teams that have a really thoughtful strategy where people are getting consistent feedback on what they can be doing differently, where people are, you feel like you're set up to bring your best self to work. And we've also been on teams where the leadership doesn't deliver on that consistently. So, it sounds really like kind of corny, like management book, whatever, but like the multiplying effect that you can have on a team. And I'm not saying I'm perfect at my job and I always kill it in this department, but it's really exciting for me to have the opportunity to have a multiplying effect on the amazing members of our team by making sure we have a clear strategy, by making sure I'm removing anything that gets in the way of them doing their job. Like, that is so fun for me.
Awesome. Emre, how about you? Why CISO?
I never wanted to be one. A lot of people told me I would be good at it, and I kind of followed their advice. I follow a lot of advices, sometimes terrible advices, but and then the only thing that I knew that actually real, that not much advice driven, but kind of like internal driven, was that I've been all over the security, all over, like from server security to network security for all the guys there who know what that is. So there used to be server security. And then like from there to like forensics to, I don't know, like firefighting to operations to product security to enterprise security. Literally, I've been everywhere on that spectrum. And that kind of prepared me for the guidance that I give right now, that I feel extremely lucky, I guess, to be able to do that. And I think that kind of made my decision, right? Hey, I've been here, I've been there. I know about this stuff. I know about this stuff. I've seen the terrible version of this stuff. I've seen the great version of that stuff. So how can I make it my own company's stuff, right? So that's kind of helped me a lot. And then there has been a lot of people who really like pushed me from my corner. It was like first in the IC corner, I'm like, I'm gonna break things. That's it. And then no, you should build good stuff. Okay, all right, I'm gonna build good stuff. And then like, maybe you should lead a team. Nah, technology easy, human hard. So, and then I ended up doing one. And then it's kind of. It kind of sounds like I didn't want to do any of these. I actually did want it, but I needed a little bit like push to do it, dude. So yeah, it's kind of how it happened for me.
And was it similar for you, Kyle? Like, did you have various different domain experiences that made you feel that you're ready, or what was it?
I had in my mind this picture that I had to get to a certain title in order to kind of be worthy of doing the move. And I had a really good conversation with Mike Johnson, who's been a CISO for a while, about 2 years ago. And he was like, don't be stupid. You're ready now. Just go.
Same here.
And I was like, okay,
Yep.
Then let's try.
Thank you.
And he was totally right. I interviewed at a lot of places and I found some really good options and settled on one that I was really excited about.
You all mentioned like politics briefly and, certain skill sets like that you picked up through different domains. What skill set do you think that someone should start developing if they don't have already before they go and accept a CISO role?
So when you think about the first time CISO kind of job, the most common one is like a small SaaS company that's maybe Series B, Series C, and starting to scale. And in that environment, understanding all the different pieces of the business and how they function and why they need to do what they do, I think is really, really important. So for me, owning vendor security at Salesforce was one of the best things I ever did for my career, because it taught me through what everyone was buying to, automate and scale, what their business needs were and what their challenges were. And then dropping into a much, much smaller company, the challenges and problems were identical. And so that really helped me get a foothold with all the different business departments I needed to influence.
I've been really surprised. I suppose I thought that this job would be trying to convince people that security matters. I've found a surprising amount of this job is actually contextualizing individual risks. Humans are really bad at the risk management calculation, like the likelihood times impact. And sometimes when a new threat arises and it's being talked about at really any level of the company, people focus on the worst possible outcome and not the likely outcome, and not the likelihood of it happening or not happening, which is, so there's a lot of passion of, oh, we need to fix this right now because they're thinking of the worst possible thing that could come to fruition, which maybe seems great if you're like, well, you run security. Don't you want everyone to throw all of the resources at that? If that's the way that you run the program, it can be very like, chasing shiny objects. And then if you're investing your time there, then you're not investing your time in something that maybe is a bigger risk because it is more likely to happen. And so I think that the skill set that I'd be developing is when a new threat arises and someone brings it to your team, helping them and yourself sort of contextualize what is the real risk instead of let's throw all of our resources on this right now. Like let's actually approach it in a more thoughtful, calculated way. Because especially as a leader of a program, you can't be. People are going to get burnt out if every single time something comes up, you're sprinting towards fixing that, and then you get 75% of the way there, and a new threat or risk comes up, and you start sprinting in the other direction. So that's something that I would start noodling on.
I saw Emre shaking his head vigorously when you started.
No, I was shaking my head with the risk gauge of people. I mean, it's just terrible. I mean, people are a terrible risk. I don't know what we have as a risk calculator. I don't know how we survived being like 8 billion people. We make terrible risk decisions. In addition to that, I think one thing that helped me a lot is empathy, and that kind of empathy with the developer, empathy with the business, empathy with the customer especially. And that helps a lot driving some of these terrible risk calculation matrices in our head. For example, should we shut down this thing? You have some sort of experience that you know that the likelihood of shutting it down is not gonna impact the business that much, or likelihood of that shutting it down is going to impact the business a lot, but not actually a risk. Maybe we shouldn't shut it down, right? Maybe we should let it do something and then plan accordingly, right? That's some sort of an empathy on not just say, yep, there's something there, let's shut it down. That's risky, right? Being able to make that call and in the position to make that call is actually pretty scary, but still, like I think that's where the empathy helps a lot, and then sometimes even in the way of doing things too. Like I've seen that too. We can talk about it, but yeah, I think empathy is extremely important for being any sort of leader. So
yeah, I think that also makes your partners see you as more human and not like just someone who's going to come with a list of things for them to do and like orders to execute on, but someone who will work with them together for what's better for the business, and security is a part of that.
Ari? I think I liked what you were saying, Katie, about kind of risk and prioritization, because I think one of the biggest things that I feel more prepared for because of some of the prior things that I've done is that, you don't have unlimited resources. You don't have unlimited people to solve all of the security problems, even though that would be lovely. Which ones do you pick? Why do you pick them? And then how do you bump that up against all of the other priorities that your company has going on? Like new products are launching, or, there's a huge implementation that's going on. Like those same people need to help do security at your company. How do you convince them to spend time on the things that need to be prioritized? And so having that, like, going through that process and talking through that, like any kind of projects or any kind of initiatives where you can get involved in those kind of discussions, I think would be super helpful.
And explain to the customer why you made that priority. That's
and then,
like interesting.
100% explaining to the customer why you made that priority.
Why didn't you fix that CVE? Well, I was writing the feature that you want us to do. And
right.
There's no exploitability of that CVE, right? So you in like composed manner, you talk to them, and that actually builds trust.
Did you all feel that, you talked about skill sets that once you develop, did you have them when you jumped into the CISO role, or did you feel that, was there something where you were like, holy shit, like I don't know how to do this, and how did you cope with that, and how did you develop that skill set?
I think you go into your first company with a plan in mind, and they always say like no plan survives contact with the enemy. Like you get there and everything immediately changes. I think for me, I had always kind of, not put a lot of stock in compliance. It wasn't my favorite thing. And then It's a lot of what I do now is compliance, ISO, SOC 2, FedRAMP, all at the same time. It's really exciting. But you also learn that like in a small company, those compliance objectives are very, very meaningful. Like they'll let you close a deal that you couldn't deal, which might be the difference between keeping somebody or firing somebody because, you know, all the VC money dries up and suddenly you're worried about margins. So suddenly the actions that you take have a very real, profound impact. And I think that was very, very different. And I didn't expect that as much.
And any tips to cope with that, or you just try your best?
I think there's just going to be so much you don't know. You bring into it a certain skill set. You know, if you're in a more narrow job in a larger company, for example, like I was, you come in as a CISO and you have to do everything and you have to make the decision on everything. And so having a network of people, like people at this table or like Slack channels dedicated to CISOs, that has been the place where I go a lot to ask a lot of questions and get a lot of help, because you need a community of people who can teach you some of these things that you never got an opportunity to learn.
And I think on the front of those skill sets too, I think it can be really overwhelming to think, oh, well, I have to have all of these skill sets. You actually just have to be able to build a team that has all of those skill sets. And I think on the point of, you know, building your network of people who are supporting you, a lot of my team at Attentive is people that I have worked with before, and Attentive is so much better for having those really exceptional people on that team. And so, you know, it's really investing in hiring people, whether that's just, you know, it's so many people don't take the recruiting and interview process seriously. Like that is so much of our job, is really killing it with recruiting. And also just, you know, like you're here, so you're already building your network of security people. But if you move into this type of management role, like a crazy amount of your job is trying to get all of the best people you've ever worked with before to work with you again. So all of the networking you're doing now becomes extremely helpful.
Right. You're only as good as your team.
Yes. Yeah. Because none of us can do all of the things. We have to be able to hire people who can fill in those gaps.
Anything to add, Emre or?
I think certain skills that, maybe not skills, but maybe experience that I didn't have is talking to customers. That I never did it. I was always hidden under some pile that you should never talk to the customer, which may be good for a good reason. I don't know. But that was interesting because you're kind of, especially on the security front, sometimes functionality front in smaller companies, you're at the forefront of kind of like where the friction zone, where customers like, what I wanted this, and I got this, right? And then that part is interesting. Also, something really cool that I've seen that I never ever thought of it is that you give confidence to some people who are going to use your product. That's like, hey, yeah, that guy knows what he's talking about. I think they're doing the right thing. And then that's how you start building the trust, right? Trust is the most important thing, especially with data. I'm the data field, right? And then that kind of was missing for me. And then compliance was 25 years of my life, professional life. I'm like, I don't want compliance. And then I had to, and I killed it. But I got SOC 2, Type 2, ISO 27001, all of these compliance, HIPAA. But what I learned is that without these on the table, it doesn't even start, right? So the business doesn't even start. So that's a huge impact to the business by the virtue of, you know, getting these compliance certifications. And I'm a firm believer of, if you're secure, you're compliant. If you're compliant, you might not be secure, right? Once you focus on security, you're only like 90% there, right? And the other one is mapping those controls to what they require in the compliance side. Yeah.
What you brought up about the customer calls, and I would say also calls with auditors too.
Yeah.
That it is such a specific song and dance. Like it is its own, like if you're an application security engineer and it's like, well, I don't take random calls with customers, you want to move into a role where you would be more customer facing, just shadow some of those calls, because it is just really, there is a certain language of saying, I don't know the answer to that. Let me go figure it out and get back to you. And like being smooth and confident about that. That is just like really great to have under your belt.
Yeah, we used to give, the compliance team at Twilio used to give like how to talk to an auditor briefings before an audit, and they would bring in like all the engineers that needed to do it because it is a specific language, and if you don't know it, you like all of a sudden you have all these like unnecessary things that are on your audit reports that go to your customer, and then you have to explain it to them too, which is kind of like a double whammy for I think what you were talking about, Emre.
That's terrible. You don't want to explain your audit missings, like what you missed in the audit. You don't want to explain that to your customers.
Yeah.
It's some really great tips there on how to prepare, what to watch out for. Moving on from just like preparing for the role, when you start to receive offers for head of security or CISO roles, what are some things that one should watch out for? Like, are there any due diligence items? Like, for example, I always think about the org structure, like, should the role only report to head of engineering, or would it be okay to report to CFO? How do you think about that? And, due diligence in general, like what would you think about before accepting an offer?
I think, there are like obviously the regular due diligence for any role, like what kind of company is it? Do you like the product? Do you care about securing the product? Is for smaller companies, is the company in a place where they can continue paying your paycheck financially? Those I think are kind of table stakes. I would say the biggest thing I was looking for in my role, and I think this is common across many leadership positions, is leadership committed to making the security program successful? And that can come across in a few different ways. Do they have money to put into the program? Will they let you hire the right people? And do they care, like, will they put their own necks out to like make sure that you're successful? Because it's not just you, it's commitment across the board. And so that's the number one thing that I think is important when looking for a role.
I would say also, choosing your first CISO role, that's your moment to be really, really selfish, because in theory, you're going to want a second CISO role. Maybe you won't, but you want a second CISO role. And so you're going to have to pick a company where you can survive for 2 years. You have the correct authority to actually get stuff done that you can show for when you go on to the next company. And there are a lot of, I would call them maybe like traps out there where they say it's a CISO role, but it's just going to be you by yourself forever with a mountain of tech debt that you can never solve. And that's just, it sucks for them, but it's not good for your career to kind of go into that. So looking for a company where you can get alignment with a boss around resourcing and like what the plan is. Because, if you talk to your boss and you're like, I think this needs to be a 6-person team in the first year, and he's like, whoa, like it's just you, there's no money for anything else, that's a red flag. But he may say, well, I was thinking more like 4, and maybe that's fine. You can come to an agreement like that.
Katie, I'm sure you have a lot to say about.
I do. I love the org structure question because I know we have different opinions about this. I have to be reporting into. I need to be in the same place as engineering, so I report into a CTO, and I have reported all over the place, like COO, CFO. Guy that was a founder and also ran a research team. Like, where can we put security next? And I just think these are all competent leaders. The issue for me when I've been anywhere other than engineering is not feeling like our team was really part of the engineering team, and consequently feeling like our wins are each other's, my wins are your wins are my wins. We really, we are in engineering all hands together. We go to the engineering offsite together, and that sort of collaboration and like the relationship building with those teams that you get organically, if that's where your org sits, is incredibly helpful to me, because obviously we work with all different, and I'm at a SaaS company, so it might be SaaS company specific, but we work with all different teams, but I don't have a lot of, it's just much less complicated projects that we do with essentially any other team, and having the buy-in from other engineers, and the level of comfort to go back and forth. They want to do something. We are like, hey, that's a little bit janky. Maybe we could switch it up and do it in this slightly more secure way. And they're like, oh, well, that would actually screw me up a little bit. What if we did, like that back and forth until you get to the perfect solution? It's really hard to do that without a rapport. So that's why I like to make kiss engineering security.
Does anyone
I
here
would
think that
love-
they would be able to work with anyone that's not in engineering, like report to anyone else and still be successful?
Don't everyone look at me, because Katie and I were discussing this before this. Also, I would love to hear an org discussion with the kiss. Okay, here are my thoughts on this particular topic. The teams that I've been on before have also reported to like a whole host of places. It's been engineering, it's been legal, it's been finance. I've reported security teams into the CEO before. I think the most important thing, I think ideal world, right? You do report into engineering, and the engineering leader is super supportive of the security org. I think if you don't have that second part, it can be a nightmare. And so like my preference is whoever is most willing to throw support behind the security org to get things done is where potentially the best place for security is, because I think that you can also have a lot of those amazing relationships with engineering, go to engineering all hands, like be part of their offsites, their fun activities. Do kiss. Yeah. I just like my train of thought.
It's gone.
I think that you can have a lot of that without being in the eng org. It's obviously way easier if you're in the org and reporting to the same person and whatnot. But I've also seen that go incredibly poorly. And so I have like a slightly different take on just like level of support being the number one thing.
I think it depends. The answer is it depends, just like many answers in security. It depends on the technology or manufacturing, right? I mean, that also depends. Like you can be a CISO for manufacturing and or financial organization where you're heavily regulated and you're under chief risk officer. It kind of depends. I like being under engineering because I'm an engineer at the end of the day, and then I can speak the language and I can, like I said, let's go back to it. I can build empathy, right? Because this guy has to write this code for 8 hours. Maybe he's not going to sleep tonight, right? And then I think it depends. It really depends. I like CFOs a lot. That's weird, but because they're kind of like that's super weird because they kind of are the most risk aware people in a company. And then since our job is risk and trust, I think that's also an interesting combination where you might think of it too. I like so far being under engineering because we play this game. There has been occasions where segregation of duties, right? I mean, like they ruled me out because it was a more important thing for engineering, which is, I'm like, okay, great. I mean, I don't take it personally, but here's the risk. You sign off on that risk, we go our ways, and we're fine, right? So sometimes I've seen it happening that engineering wins all the time, but hey, somebody's gonna win.
I think the other part of this question is something you need to touch on, which is when you're taking that role, what should you be looking for to set yourself up for success? Because he told me about some things that I probably should have asked about being in my contract,
Right.
but
Me neither.
I just simply didn't.
That was going to be like, speaking of risk, what should you have in your contract to protect yourself from, liability or, have the titles that you want? Like, how do you negotiate that? And I've heard things like, double trigger and, compensation in case of termination. How should you think about the contract?
So I'm very lucky to have some really strong CISO mentors who've helped me through this period. And I think the most important thing I learned is everything is negotiable. Everything is negotiable. Your title, your salary, your options, the things in your contract to protect you, they can all be shifted to end up with an offer that best suits you. So there's probably 3 things that every CISO wants in their contract. And as a first-time CISO, you probably aren't going to get all of them. There's the double trigger, which is change of control, change of scope. So like if your company gets acquired and you're not going to get a CISO job in the acquired company, that activates your double trigger and accelerates your options. So you can potentially go somewhere else and not lose out on, the payout. There is golden parachute, which is that they fire you. They have to do it in a certain way for a certain amount of money, which can really protect you in very risky companies. If you're taking a big risk, there's a lot of dangerous tech debt. Getting a golden parachute is important. And then directors and officers insurance. Not every CISO is a director of the company, but you can get specifically named on the insurance policy. And that's really important if you get personally sued for something that happened at the company. The D&O insurance will protect you and provide you legal coverage. I'd be curious for everyone. I personally got a double trigger, but nothing else.
I can't emphasize enough how much I didn't know any of these things existed before taking this role, so I certainly have none of them.
I know who's going to be my next advisor for my next role. I have no parachutes, or I just like free falling. So.
Yeah, same. Kyle, if you could provide your information to be all of our agents.
Yeah, my service is available. I will help.
These were things that I was vaguely aware that were out in the world, but because I was not, when I actually interviewed, it was for a head of GRC role. It wasn't necessarily something that was as applicable. And if I had interviewed as a head of security, I probably would have looked slightly into. But yeah, definitely something to keep in mind for next time.
And did you negotiate for all the other things and didn't get them, or did you not know about them?
Yeah, I tried. I think at the time my company was a little immature, so like the D&O thing, they were just like, we don't know how to do that. So no, so that's one I've still been working on. Like 2 years later, I think I'm about to get on the D&O policy. So I'm excited about that. I think you also mentioned title. I think title is one of the most critical things you can negotiate. Like when we submitted the CFP, one of the pieces of feedback we got from the proposal was, well, there's only one CISO in this panel about CISOs. Like, what's with that?
It's me. Yeah.
And I think there's a conflation in our industry about like, there's the title CISO, which is like a C-level executive. And then there's the role of CISO, which is like named in compliance documents and, diligence, and that role of CISO doesn't always have the title of CISO. And some people who get the title CISO don't always have the role of actually owning security of the company. So you got to make sure you're getting, I think the first time you want the role of CISO more than you necessarily need the title of CISO. So that's why I negotiated for head of security. I think, Emre, you negotiate for head of security.
They just give it to me. So
if you can get CISO, great. But I think there are other very...
If you get CISO, that probably, you can't negotiate. I can't come in and be like, I want everything. You have to pick the thing.
Or can you?
That you want. And I remember when I was like, okay, look, it's so stupid. Like, obviously all of us have the same job and security people know that. Honestly, at the time, I was applying to executive MBA programs, and I was like, having a CISO title is going to help my application to get into one of the top schools that I want to go to. So that's why that was important to me at the time. But for other people, I'm sure for most people, it's like, oh, if I pick one thing to negotiate on, am I going to have a fancier title on LinkedIn, or am I going to get more money? Like, probably more people. Yeah. If I wasn't in that very specific situation, I would have preferred the latter.
I think there's also, I'm going to slightly change the topic. So you go first.
So I think I couldn't emphasize more. I think head of security and compliance most of the time does exactly the same job as a CISO or whatever title, VP of security or something like that. And the quality of the work is pretty much the same. The quantity of the work might be even higher than CISO, but CISO title always wins. That's an interesting one, because there might be CISOs who are doing less work, getting paid less, but if they want to get another job,
much less work.
There you go. Some of us do, but it might be for your next role, you might be on top of the funnel, right? That's interesting.
And in your first role too, like I think you made the point of early on in your career, you should always be making the decisions that are maximizing your learning. Mm-hmm. So if you are have a CISO title at one of those companies that you were describing, where it's like, okay, we're giving you no resources. Your job is basically to like sit at this desk with an enormous amount of tech debt. That's not it. It's
I'll
much
also
better
throw
to
in like a marketing CISO.
yes.
Like if you're like a sales focused CISO, that's also a different role, a very like important one, and one that I don't want to do. So thank you for those people who do it. But it's a different type of CISO role with a CISO title.
Yeah, that's true.
So what was the topic that you were gonna?
Oh, I was going to
change?
talk about
Yeah.
marketing CISO. So I just I pushed it in right there.
Perfect. Talking about making a ton of money, are y'all making a ton more money than you did before?
Yes.
No.
No, wait, I'm not actually. I think also a big, our company is, I think one of the biggest differences too is equity. And I have RSUs at a company that is private, and they are nothing unless we have a liquidation event. So the answer is actually like not so much, but it's also, I mean, all of us are first time CISOs, you know?
Yeah, as a first time
Experience.
CISO, if you land in a post IPO company, kudos, right? That's great. And then kind of the answer is kind of related to that, because we play with the monopoly money, right? And then the post IPO is real money. And then if you go from a real money company to, it doesn't matter the title or whatever, if you go from one that has actual money and then the other to the monopoly money, you make less money, period, because a good chunk of your income is actually that money. And then, but the other interesting part is that since now you're tied to make that monopoly money real money, you work your ass off to actually make it happen. So that's where, and one of the things that if you're going to sell software or SaaS or whatever, trust is one of the most important things, right? And then that's where you actually double work your ass off, because now you want actual money. So
Yeah.
and the answer is I make less money. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to follow up, I think that's also the most fun time to be at the company, because I think everyone has the same goal.
Yeah.
Is it?
Of let's be successful and
Yeah.
have a liquidation event.
For small companies, so when I joined NGRAC, we were pre-Series A, and it was a bootstrapped startup. And I had a really, really hard time just figuring out what I should be getting paid. And so I would come to the table with like, here's what I used to get paid. Can you figure out what that means because I was at a public company prior. I was going to essentially a bootstrap startup that had maybe funding dreams in the future. And so this was actually something that like a lot of my mentors helped me figure out, and like hooked me up with like different people around, how do I value startup funding? Like, you can read every article on the internet, but none of them, and if you know of any, please email them to me. None of them really talk about what you should be getting paid as a security leader at a 30-person company that hasn't taken funding yet. And so that was actually really, really hard for me. So I think that I'm making an equivalent amount that I was before. So I definitely didn't get a pay raise, but it's definitely a different type of role in a different type of company.
I think it's also the same thing that's true for any job, which is I am making more money because I left my old company and went to a new company. Like that's when the big, I was at one company for a really long chunk of my career. And I think anytime you do that, it just kind of ends up, your salary doesn't really keep. If you work at the company that I work at, I'd ignore everything I just said. But if you
Right. So before we open it up for questions, a quick, one sentence impact. Like, what impact or what is the biggest achievement each of you have had at your company so far?
I'm about 3 weeks away from FedRAMP, moderate. And so for me, I'm very, very excited about that.
That's freaking wild. We're doing a big cross-functional engineering project that requires work from every single engineering team. And it just requires so much buy-in and participation and effort across all of engineering. And what's meaningful about that to me, I mean, it will improve our security posture, but just that requires buy-in from leadership across engineering. And that's like gorgeous.
So I think for those who know me, my currency is impact. I mean, okay, everybody's currency is dollars, but like I'm actually super happy when I have an impact. I have impact bigger than security right now in my company. Like started engineering bootcamp, started a bunch of different interesting interactive things to make people actually know each other, etc. To make it work. I think my biggest impact, that my gauge of impact is actually when I talk to the customers, and when I got like a stern face and it's like, so tell me about your security, how do you do this? And then at the end of the meeting they're like, cool, I like that, yeah, nice, and then that's huge impact right there, because that's gonna transfer as a word of mouth, right, to their peers and their colleagues and their other companies, etc. That's kind of my impact gauge right there.
I think the biggest thing that I've noticed, so we've gotten feedback a couple of times from our engineering org that the security team, and this is, it's two of us, so it's not really, take this with a grain of salt, but the security team is really easy to work with. And I think that's like, you can't get anything done if people don't want to work with you. And so that for me is like the biggest thing thus far, and hopefully the biggest thing in the future.
Being able to build a culture where everyone's on board security.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So it's easy to build something for just the security team to use, but it's really hard to build processes and tooling that other people like to use as well.
True. Awesome. Right. I think we're ready for questions.
What percentage of your time is spent doing people management of your direct reports?
Okay, the question was, what percentage of your time is spent doing people management of your direct reports?
I only have one, so very little.
We also pretty lean security team, and then when you say people management, if it's prioritizing work, I think you got to minimize that by hiring like someone who's very self-motivated at this stage of your team. Driving their career is a constant thing. I would say at least 10 to 20% of my time, to be honest. Yeah.
I think one of the terms I really loved when I was interviewing was the term player coach. You kind of sell yourself for these roles as like, I can be hands-on, but also grow and scale a team at the same time. So there is, 50% or more of it is probably going to be hands-on until you actually scale that team up.
Yeah, and I think in addition to, I mentioned this before, but in addition to, one-on-ones and making sure that their goals are clear for your directs, I was the first security hire, and now IT is part of our team as well. A lot of the last year has been spent finding and coaching up the right leaders of that team, especially in IT, because I have not run an IT team before. So I needed to really find someone who could independently lead that function. And that was, I was spending 2.5 hours in interviews every single day and just ending the day like an absolute corpse.
Yes, please go ahead.
Do you report to the board, and if so, what does it look like?
Do you report to the board?
Yes.
And what does it look like?
Yes.
I report to an audit committee quarterly, which is a subset of the board. And that's been true other places that I've worked as well. The audit committee is focused on like accounting stuff, but increasingly IT and security and internal audit are reporting in there. The approach that I take is every single meeting, I remind them, this is why our security team exists. Like, we meet our compliance requirements. We we are mitigating our known risks to a reasonable threshold, and we are building resilience so that we can bounce back quickly from an incident. And then I talk about this is what we have done over the last quarter to move towards those outcomes. And then this is what we're doing in the next quarter. I have one board member who totally gets it and is so smart. I really, I think a lot of times it's just like, oh, I hope that nothing bad happens to me in this meeting. I actually get a lot of value out of meeting with this board member. I think that he's a genius.
Yeah, we right now we're a small company. We also have a very small board. I report security as a part of the engineering update. In prior roles, where I've built out board reporting for my boss, it's looked essentially like there's everybody has their own kind of formula, but generally it's like what kind of current events are happening and how does that impact our company? What kind of projects do we have going on? And then usually there's some kind of like highlight reel of either something cool that's been going on or a problem that needs to be fixed or like a assessment readout, something kind of like topical.
I personally do not report to the board, but I prepare a lot of metrics to the board. Board is extremely interested in risk, and then when cybersecurity professionals, we think risk as cybersecurity risk, but there are other risks, not being able to fund it. There's building fire risk, etc. And then at this point, I have a feeling that our company has like bigger risk fires that they're fighting than cybersecurity, and then but it gets reported. So yeah.
I think we have a question on this side, right?
I'll just yell. I love this panel. Thank you. It's so spot on. My question is, you all mentioned mentors and your community or your squad as a CISO. We might be a little short on time. So the best thing that you did, the number one thing you did to gather that squad.
The number one thing that you did to build a network of mentors.
Just be shameless. Just ask for things that you feel so uncomfortable asking for because they're all super, super busy and distracted by like a million different things. But if you can be very specific, like, hey, I'm not in a Slack channel. Can you put me in a Slack channel? They're like, oh, yeah, that's really easy for me to do. I didn't think about doing that for you, but I'll do it now. Like, just ask.
And it's not, I mean, on the receiving end of them, it's funny how I feel so awkward asking other people for help, and then someone asks me for help, and I'm like, yeah, friggin' no brainer. Okay, I listened to a podcast about reporting risk to management, and it was so amazing. But the guy gave a high level overview of it, and I was like, I want to do this, but I'm missing some pieces of data. Like, you know, he didn't go into enough detail here. And I messaged him on LinkedIn, and he sent me back a Calendly link, and he was like, put time on my calendar. His name is Jim. He was like the CISO of like CVS Health and a billion giant companies. And he's like, yeah, I'm retired. I just like play pickleball with my wife. And then you can put time on my calendar, literally whenever you want. I like it. For free. I was like, it's insane. It's insane. So do that to Jim.
Right. So we're out of time, but we're going to stick around for 10 more minutes. So if you want to come ask questions, or if you want to get to all these people and say, hey, can you be my mentor? You know.
Also, you can just add us on LinkedIn. We're all very cool with that.
Yep.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Also, thank you to Divya who has, yes, thank you.
It was my pleasure.